Hello and welcome to the March 12th edition of the Bub Report. This week, we will take a deep dive into the proposed data protection bill that will be tabled before the Grenada Parliament this week. The Data Protection Bill has as its preamble a remit that seeks to establish a new framework for managing the processing of personal data in Grenada. This bill contains 8 parts and seeks to promote the protection of personal data processed by public and private bodies to provide for the functions of the Information Commission and for related matters. Only 11 Caribbean jurisdictions have passed data privacy laws to date. 7 jurisdictions, including Grenada, have no substantive laws to govern personal data protection. 6 of the 7 jurisdictions without any privacy law have some activity, indicating steps toward the eventual passage of privacy laws. Only 2 of the jurisdictions surveyed in last year's report had no meaningful developments to report. The bill that is to go before Parliament, however, has raised some concerns, especially in Section 33 of the Act, titled Warrant and Search. This section states if a magistrate is satisfied by information on oath supplied by an authorized officer that there are reasonable grounds for suspecting that an offense under this Act has been or is being committed, and that evidence of the commission of the offense is to be found on any premises specified by the authorized officer, the magistrate may issue a warrant authorizing the authorized officer to enter the premises, to search the premises, to inspect, examine, operate, and test any equipment found on the premises and which is used or intended to be used for the processing of personal data, to inspect and seize any documents or other material found on the premises and which may constitute evidence of the commission of the offense, to require any person on the premises to provide an explanation of any document or other material found on the premises, and to require any person on the premises to provide other information as may reasonably be required to determine whether the data user has committed the offense. This week, we disaggregate the proposed bill with a constitutional attorney. In 2020, civil society and the then opposition NDC opposed measures of the COVID-19 control bill, which attempted to give law enforcement in Grenada sweeping powers under the Public Health Emergency Powers Act.
To determine that somebody is potentially infectious. So if you clear your throat, something stick in your throat and you clear your throat too hard, and a police officer forms the opinion that that was a dry cough he heard, he can detain you, hold you and force you into quarantine. He may ask you for certain information. If you refuse, you can be forcibly put into quarantine. Within 48 hours, we must be brought to court because the Constitution protects our right to walk free and to live free.
And they would use all means of the state. They would use the parliament, they would use the public service, they would use...
Later in our program, we sit with 2 members of Grenada's second oldest public sector union for a conversation on the future of the Public Workers Union. We welcome our guests, Dr. Francis Alexis, constitutional attorney, Fimber Thomas, former vice president of the Grenada Public Workers Union, and Brian Grimes, president of the Public Workers Union. Here is Dr. Bub with this week's editorial titled The Downsides of Data Protection Laws. I am Rion Charles. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we do apologize for the delayed start this morning. So we will get immediately to this week's editorial because we have been keeping our guests waiting. So we will get right to it. Now, last week, the draft data protection bill was circulated in St. George's in advance of its first reading in Parliament next week. Data protection bills, in principle, are necessary in this hyper-networked age in which we now live. Roughly 70% of the world's population is now online, and the same can be said for the Caribbean. In fact, over 19 people in the Caribbean use the internet. This is an exciting development given the significant socioeconomic benefits that can be derived from its increasing connectivity. However, the risk to privacy also increases with the number of people online, coupled with the growing availability and accessibility of online platforms and apps. Data protection laws provide for the protection of personal privacy by prohibiting the unlawful use or disclosure of personal data. The laws, in essence, seek to provide certain rights of individuals, of data subjects, and impose specific obligations on people who possess personal data outside of personal use. And while it is important to have such laws in place, these laws must, however, not be written in such a way as to infringe on the right to privacy or to give a green light for any government to act in ways that are in abrogation of the citizens' constitutional rights. In 2020, the opposition National Democratic Congress raised the alarm concerning sections of the COVID-19 control bill, understandably so. In fact, they said it was unconstitutional, and they joined a slew of civil society activists to protest sections of the legislation. I also challenged then Attorney General, the former Attorney General of Grenada, Mr. Darshan Ramdani, about sections of the bill that concerned the national community. Now, with respect to the bill that is about to go before Parliament this week, we believe that Section 33 and 45 must be revisited. As an independent journalist, I see many red flags with respect to ways in which Section 33 can abridge the freedom of the press. Moreover, the Grenada Constitution already protects the exchange of public information. Further, there is already an Electronic Crimes Act in Grenada. The Constitution of the State of Grenada also protects the private exchange of information in Section 10, subsection 2b, which reads, quote, "The protection of freedom of expression is reasonably required for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence," unquote. As was done in 2020, we trust that those who were opposed to portions of the COVID-19 control bill would not be hypocrites and call for a thorough recall and revision of sections of this bill before it becomes law of the land. Again, we do not oppose the bill in its entirety, but we believe that sections of the bill ought to be properly revised. And at this point, I wish to welcome our first guest for this morning's program. He is a veteran constitutional attorney. He's also a former Attorney General of the state of Grenada, and he's an expert on many things related to Caribbean jurisprudence. Dr. Francis Alexis, welcome to the Bob Report, sir. And I do apologize again for the late start. Yes, so Dr. Alexis, let us talk about the draft data protection bill. We had an opportunity to send the bill to you. On first reading, let us first talk about, in your view, the benefits that the bill would bring as a law into the state of Grenada.
First of all, let me thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for having me on your Bob Report. I noticed the program is, I think, sponsored by the Public Workers Union, so I want to thank them too. And your Rian Charles has been putting me through my paces. Thank him
Yes,
for that.
yes, he has. It's not sponsored by the Public Workers Union, but we do have a Public Workers Union forum today. So,
Exactly.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
And I do want to salute you for having this program. There are, as you say, many countries in the world which have data protection legislation. It's nothing new. In fact, the UK had their own in first 1998, and I think they revamped it in 2018. The fact they revamped it means that these pieces of legislation need to be looked at carefully. Take, for example, this Data Protection Bill 2022, Grenada. Well, it's just a bill and it requires looking at, no doubt. Then you go to clause 22, you see a lot of phrases there. The general principle, the disclosure principle, the retention principle, etc. I may have missed it, but I'm not seeing in the bill where these expressions are defined. More importantly, your concern about clause 33 has some merit. I'm concerned about the matter of the authorized officer. It's going to get this warrant. The proposal to appoint the authorized officer under section clause 44 is absolutely too wide. This clause is saying that the chief executive officer or the commission may delegate any power or function, under this act to an authorized officer. And while we are about that, I know the bill defines the chief executive officer as meaning the most senior administrative officer of an operation, highest level of administrative functions. That is not satisfactory, certainly in relation to this bill, because if you look at the commission can appoint a number of functionaries in clause 26. Which one of these is going to be the chief executive officer? And who is going to decide which person fits the bill of being chief executive officer? So I'll start with that for the time being. Until I come back later. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, so those were your initial observations. Now, let us talk about data protection, of course, as we know, within the ambit of the public service. And of course, we want to look at the preamble of the bill, which I think is in principle very good, because it talks about, and the preamble says, it seeks to establish a new framework for managing the processing of personal data. It contains 8 parts and seeks to promote the protection of personal data processed by public and private bodies, to provide for the functions of the Information Commission and related matters. Now, Dr. Alexis, you are aware of the functioning of the public service. Do you believe that the current data processing protocols that are in line with constitutional mandates in Grenada are inadequate, such that we would need a new particular piece of legislation to make up for these deficiencies and to also make up for the evolution of the way that data is now handled in the 21st century?
Whether the protocols are adequate or not might better be addressed by two groups of people, or probably three. One, those familiar with the working of the Public Service Commission, and I am not. Those who have been at the receiving end of these mandates, I think the Public Workers Union would fit that bill. And thirdly, officers of the public service themselves. So I can't say that I can speak helpfully on the question whether those mandates are adequate or not. I'm sorry.
Now, and Dr. Alexis, also the bill talks about the authorized officer. That authorized officer, I mean, is that the Director of Public Prosecution? Is that the Prime Minister? I mean, it just seems to be very open ended.
Well, you would recall that's the first point I made.
Yeah.
That clause 44 says that the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission may delegate any power or direction under this Act to an authorized officer. We don't know who might be an authorized officer, meaning there are no criteria set out in the Act, the bill, for a person being an authorized officer. That's point one. It's the first point I made. It is too open-ended. I also complain about the Chief Executive Officer. I know the bill defines it, but in the context of this bill, the definition in the bill is universal. It's not confined to this bill. And at the very least, this bill should identify who would be the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission in any event. The idea that not only the Commission itself, but the Chief Executive Officer may delegate any power or function under this Act to an authorized officer must be an abuse of power by Parliament. That clause needs surgery, if not elimination.
And let us get to Section 38, which talks about whistleblower protection. It says an employer, whether or not being a public body, shall not dismiss, suspend, demote, discipline, harass, or otherwise disadvantage an employee or deny that employee for a benefit because the employee is acting in good faith on the basis of reasonable belief, has notified the Commission, or any other person has contravened or is about to contravene this act, done or stated the intention of doing so. Now, in essence, it talks about whistleblower protection. But Dr. Alexis, do we have whistleblower protection legislated in the state of Grenada? I'm not aware. It mentions whistleblower protection a lot here, but that was something I was not understanding. Is there a way that you can explain how that would be enforced or how that would be defined?
You may say that the Employment Act protects whistleblowing to the extent that the Act outlaws unfair dismissal and it addresses unlawful dismissal too. Outside of those provisions in the Employment Act, I am not aware of whistleblower protection provisions as such. However, let me say this. If this bill passes and an employee is doing what is required by the bill, it would not be proper for an employer to dismiss the employee only because of the employee's cooperating with the act. So in principle, this clause 38 is fair.
Okay. And let's get to clause 39, and then I would get to the area that really caused my skin to raise, as we say. Intentional disclosure of information. A person who intentionally discloses personal information is in contravention of this act and commits an offense. It is a defense to the offense under subsection 1 if the person acted in the reasonable belief that they would have had the consent of the data subject if the data subject had known of the disclosing of the personal data and the circumstances of such disclosure. A person who collects, stores, or disposes of personal information in a manner contravenes this act and commits an offense. Your interpretation of that particular legislation, especially against the backdrop of the fact that we have in Grenada an Electronic Crimes Act already.
It can hardly be objectionable, if at all, that the bill would provide for going against a person who intentionally discloses personal information in contravention of the act. As a matter of fact, the whole point about the bill, one of them anyhow, is to protect personal information. That's the whole core of the bill, of these data protection acts across the globe. They are referred to sometimes as returning to the individual the right to have his or her personal information protected. But my concern about clause 39 then would be not that it provides what it does, but I have to take it in conjunction with clauses 20 to 22, even 23, especially clause 20. Because clause 20 is saying that personal data may be disclosed. Remember, here in clause 39, we are making it an offense to disclose personal information. But when you go to clause 20, you see that personal data may be disclosed, my word, broadly. And even not just for purposes of crime protection, detection, and prevention, but my particular concern is that it is saying, the bill is saying that personal data may be disclosed even for purposes other than those for which the data was collected. Let me repeat that. A data user having gotten personal data is going to be empowered to use that data for purposes other than those for which the data would have been collected in the first place. That is a cause for concern. If a data user collects data for particular purposes, the data user ought not to be allowed to disclose the data for purposes other than those for which the data was collected. So when you look at clause 39 in a vacuum, you might think it is harmless, but you have to contrast that now with authorization in the bill for a data user. For example, a medical doctor collected data regarding a particular medical complaint, can then use that for other purposes. A lawyer having a file on someone regarding a particular case can then use that, subject to principles of confidentiality, which the bill does not address frontally. Subject to principles of confidentiality, data users having collected data for particular purposes can then use them for other purposes, whether at the behest of the state or other concerns. That needs to be revisited. And that is always a concern regarding data protection.
Okay, so you're saying that that area needs to be revisited. Okay, now, yes, let us go on to the section again. That is section 33, warrants to enter and search. And again, I'm going to share it again so that for the benefit of our viewers, they can see that particular section. Again, this legislation, as a disclaimer, it is proposed legislation. It's not been tabled before Parliament as yet. And of course, as we know, whenever bills come up before Parliament, there are opportunities for amendments. There are also opportunities for withdrawing bills in its entirety, coming back, going back to the drafting table, going back to Parliament. But we want to cite that particular section here. Warrant to enter and search. If a magistrate is satisfied by information on oath supplied by an authorized officer that there are reasonable grounds for suspecting that an offense under this act has been or is being committed, and that evidence of the commission of the offense is to be found on any premises specified by the authorized officer, the magistrate may issue a warrant authorizing the authorized officer to do the following: to enter a citizen's premises, to search the premises, to inspect, examine, operate, and test any equipment found on the premises, to inspect, seize any documents, to require any person on the premises to provide an explanation of any document, and to require any person on the premises to provide other information as may be reasonably required. Dr. Alexis, over to you for your interpretation of that clause.
A number of points are to be made here, Dr. Bob. One, if you look at subclause 1, paragraphs C and D, to require any person on the premises to provide explanation or other information. So what if a person just happens to be on the compound and not even connected to the operations there? A person visiting a lawyer, for example, a person visiting a bank. These two paragraphs, E and F, they needed to be rephrased to say something like, any person on the premises connected to the operations on the premises. You need some controlling clause phrase like that. So C, E, and F, you can't require any person who just happens to be on the premises to furnish this sort of information. However, I must tell you that the modern law is that where there is reasonable suspicion about a criminal offense having been committed, equipments, including computers, telephones, and so on, may be seized, searched. I think only last year, the Privy Council, in a case from Montserrat, approved of searching and seizing gadgets like telephones and computers, tablets, where there is reasonable cause for believing that an offense has been committed. And that's not the first time. We had cases from the Bahamas quite a few years ago where the Privy Council was also taking that view. So we have to come up with formulae which would have regard to the inclination of the Privy Council, the inclination of the Privy Council to allow crime prevention personnel to search and seize equipment, including electronic equipment. And I'm looking at that word in paragraph C, to inspect, examine, operate, and test any equipment found on the premises. The Privy Council is steadfast that the word equipment is broad enough to include, as I said, electronic gadgets. In this, my read of the development of these data protection acts across the world, they are presented as enabling the private individual to retake his or her personal data. But the reality is that these pieces of legislation, they are used more often than not to enable the state to invade the privacy of the individual, far from enabling the individual to protect his or her privacy. On the contrary, they enable the state to invade the privacy of the individual. Of course, you can say, Dr. Bob, no person has privacy in criminality. And the Privy Council puts it that way sometimes. No person has privacy in criminality. So that the courts are more and more requiring lawyers to be, if I may use that term, whistleblowers against their clients in relation to criminality. And the philosophy is that no client has any constitutionality or privacy in criminality. So we are going down a slope here, which is very slippery, in that while the privacy of the individual is presented as being protected by these data protection pieces of legislation, you would know, Dr. Bob, that more often than not, these pieces of legislation are used as instruments for invading privacy.
They are weaponized in such a way as to violate that constitutional right.
You could put it that way. And that is why you are to be congratulated for having this discussion. You make the point that in principle, the bill might not be objectionable, but there are clauses which need to be looked at, and I have given you several instances right here in clause 33. Clause E and F are apt to be used oppressively. Yes, of course, I'm not talking about the issuing of the warrant. Magistrates are by training and experience and wisdom, knowledgeable on the issuing of warrants. But I can cite you cases where warrants have been issued oppressively. If you take the case from Antigua, for example, Observer Publications and the Attorney General, a warrant was issued by the Chief Magistrate himself. And the High Court judge, Mr. Justice Benjamin, looked askance. In fact, the judge ruled that the warrant should not have been issued to search ostensibly for radio broadcasting equipment being hidden. Okay, it couldn't be hidden when it was used for broadcasting. So we recognize that magistrates are trained to decide whether warrants may be issued. But we know from experience that given the information provided to a magistrate may be misled in issuing a warrant. And definitely paragraphs C and D are too wide, and I have given you a formulation that may be inserted in those clauses to discipline the width of those provisions. I've already complained about this idea of the authorized officer, and I'm objecting to the chief executive officer and the commission being able to delegate any power that breaches all concepts of delegation of power. There must be controls over the delegation of power.
And then the minister, has the power essentially, according to the establishment of the commission, to appoint people on this commission, somebody who has expertise in law, somebody who has expertise in data protection and ICT. Now, to me, it doesn't even say that something like that. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, of course, but I do understand the function of the principles of the separation of powers. And shouldn't it be the case that a director of public prosecution, for example, an investigating officer, is the one that ought to be making those decisions in respect of determining probable cause for then going to a court to obtain a warrant to search the premises of a citizen who they suspect might be committing a crime?
The safeguard in Section 33 is that you need a warrant issued by the magistrate.
Yes.
In and of itself, that is traditional protection for the individual, no question about that. But relatedly, as you refer to Section 24, it's a little amusing because this section is saying the commission comprises 3 persons, one of whom may be the chairperson, one of whom may be the deputy chairperson. You have more officers than men here. That's quite funny, I dare say. But the sieve, the guarantee, the protection against abuse of such powers, historically, has long been requiring the warrant to be issued by the magistrate, not by the director of public prosecutions, not by the commissioner of police. Those 2 personnel, when a warrant is needed, they have to go before a magistrate.
And there is also a section, trying to find a section that sort of, I think it gives away a sort of a waiver from countersuing or challenging the commission. I'm trying to find that particular section where it says you can't. Obviously, I don't think that would hold up in court, but I'm trying to find the section Right, that's right. In section, that's on the section 34, paragraph, let's see here. I think I lost it there for a second. I believe it's under that section. In essence, it prevents the it prevents the aggrieved party or the suspect, I suppose, from there we go, civil remedies. It's actually section 36. No, actually, so I think that is an incorrect section there, but I'm going to find it.
But section
Dr. Alex.
36, clause 36 of clause 2 is relevant to the point you're making, in that it
Yes.
says that in proceedings against a public body, private body, under this section, it is a defense to prove that a public body, private body, has taken such care as in all the circumstances was reasonably required. It is not easy to fault this, but I want to take that clause in conjunction with the clause that says that if personal data is disclosed, but the data user believed that disclosure was going to be allowed by the data subject, that's a defense. That clause needs looking at again. It cannot be a sufficient provision that simply because the data user believed that the data subject was going to consent to the use of the data, that's sufficient.
Mm-hmm. And I believe I found the section, so it's section 45. Yeah, it says protection from criminal or civil proceedings. No criminal or civil proceedings shall lie against the commission or against a person acting on behalf or under the direction of the commission for anything done, reported, or said in good faith in the course of the exercise or performance of purported exercise, discharge, or performance of any power, duty, or function of the commission under this act. Your interpretation of that section, Dr. Alexis?
The phrase there, good faith, is some protection for the individual, because what was going to be challenged as having been said or done or reported, if it was covered with good faith, the individual is going to be told he or she can't complain. This is not unusual in this scenario. The requirement of good faith is some protection for the data subject. Of course, proving bad faith or absence of good faith is not easy. But the requirement that there be good faith is considerable.
Okay.
And you see it again in subclause 2.
Mm-hmm.
Both paragraph A and B. What was done in good faith is protected from being proceeded against in the court. And as I say, that is a facility which is not uncommon to these pieces of legislation and even beyond these pieces of legislation. If a judge is acting in good faith, he or she is protected. So the requirement of good faith is the valve through which both parties get some protection. The commission on the one hand, the individual on the other hand.
Okay, all right, Dr. Alexis. Thanks for this. We do have some viewer comments. One viewer was musing whether or not of course, the current administration is the NDC, but in the future it can be any other administration. We have elections every 5 years. Whether or not one can politicize the commission and weaponize it to go after political opponents. Do you see those concerns there?
Anything can be weaponized, apart from the office of High Court Judge, Supreme Court Judge. We lawyers in Grenada have had to take to the streets when we considered that the office of DPP was going to be weaponized, and we blocked it. And the office of DPP is a high constitutional office. But when we lawyers went on to the street, we were making the point, expressly or implicitly, that we were concerned that the office of DPP might be weaponized. Equally, the office of the Information Commission is not beyond being weaponized. The thing about these offices, DPP, the AG when a DPP, Information Commission, we proceed on the basis, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, that the functionary will do the right thing. If it appears that a wrong thing is being attempted, then we spring into action. But I cannot say that, as the bill is, there is anything built into it to lead to the weaponization of the commission. Or you take the office of the ombudsperson. The office of ombudsperson can be, to use your word, Dr. Bob, weaponized, if only to the extent of the ombudsperson reporting negatively on complaints which on their surface need redressing. You can read some Privy Council judgments and you can say that the Privy Council is facilitating the state. For example, last year, 2022, and I have written this publicly already, only last week or so, that the Privy Council took the concept of proportionality, which historically has been used to limit the powers of the state in relation to human rights. But the Privy Council took that and used it to limit human rights and to accommodate the power of Parliament. Well, if I'm right in that, and I know I am, was the Privy Council being weaponized? So you can't, because you have issue with a particular decision of an institution, DPP, Information Commission, High Court judge, come to the conclusion without more that somebody is weaponizing the office. So I cannot agree that inbuilt in this bill, there are mechanisms for politicizing or weaponizing the Information Commission.
Okay, very well. Dr. Alexis, we quickly have to get to the next segment, but I wanted to get some closing comments from you, especially around concerns that the Bar Association raised. It's not only people like myself raising these concerns, others in civil society as well, but the Bar said that they were not consulted. The president of the Bar said that they were not consulted on this. The Bar Association did also indicate that they will be having a meeting to discuss this legislation in advance of its tabling before Parliament this coming week. But normally what happens in those cases, central government, do they have an obligation to consult with partners such as the Bar Association before bringing such legislation to Parliament?
Not a constitutional one, but certainly civic society one.
Mm-hmm.
There has been over the years a convention, and I would say a settled convention, that the Attorney General's chambers would share with the Grenada Bar Association a bill, and indeed invite comments on a bill, certainly on a bill of this nature. What is the nature of this bill? The nature of this bill is that it, at the very least, can provoke concerns as to whether the privacy of the individual protected by the Bill of Rights of this country might be at stake. The privacy of the individual incorporates, I think it's under clause section 6 of the Constitution, freedom from having your person or property being searched arbitrarily, freedom from having equipment on your premises being searched and taken away arbitrarily. Although, as I said a few minutes ago, it is not an arbitrary trenching on these freedoms for law enforcement officers having reasonable cause for believing a crime may have been committed to search and seize equipment, including electronic gadgets. And it is precisely because there is a need to ensure that that thin line between breach and observance of privacy is had regard to, that you would have thought that the AG's chambers would have shared with the Bar Association. If the president is saying that the Bar Association has not been consulted, and if that is so, that is unfortunate. I have other concerns of the bill, a few other concerns, and I trust you would allow me to address them before I go.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We have been trying, I believe this is your first appearance on the Bub Report, but we've been trying to have you here for a long time, not on this matter, on other constitutional matters, but we want to use your expertise because we have it now.
There's always a first time, Dr. Bob.
Absolutely.
Good. Requests may be made by a data subject to access personal data stored by a data user. All well and good, but the sting is in the tail. The request can be refused, see clause 17, on the grounds set out there. The ground that causes me worry is the data user can say he or she has the written approval of the commission to deny access. It is not the function, and it should not be the function of the commission to decide what access should be afforded. The function of the commission properly is to secure compliance with the Act. I'm just paraphrasing it. If a data subject wants to have access to his or her personal data, he applies for it, I don't think that the commission by itself should be able to decide that. At the very least, we should have some kind of judicial functionary looking at the request. The same magistrate, for example. An individual ought to be able to go to the magistrate and say, I want access to my data, and I'm being refused it, and that refusal is wrong. The commission is not a judicial entity, and it should not be deciding these issues. Equally, the data subject might want rectification of the records, meaning correction of the records. Now, that too may be refused under clause 19. And there's a particular entry in clause 19 which excites interest, namely, rectification does not apply to the Citizenship by Investment Act. Now, what is so sacrosanct about this act? Considering that granting of citizenship under this act can have implications for born citizens of Grenada being able to enter other people's countries like Canada. Many years ago, I went to the High Court and complained. I think Mr. Friends of the Earth were my client. And we went to the High Court to complain that selling Grenadian citizenship is unconstitutional because it puts at risk the integrity of the Grenadian passport. It puts at risk born Grenadians being subjected to visa requirements, even in places like Canada. Mm-hmm. The High Court did not agree with me, and I left it there. But I continue to have concerns about this. And when I see the CBI Act being given this protection, this shield here, my concern is strengthened. A person is born in Grenada, that person is entitled to this sort of protection. The citizenship matters. But granting citizenship under the CBI does not qualify for this protection because of the reason I've just given, namely that it has the potential for compromising the integrity of the Grenadian passport.
Mhm.
I noticed that the Americans recently revisited certain facility historically afforded Grenada in this respect.
Which is the E2 visa.
Yes. I am assured that that has nothing to do with Grenada CBI as such or at all, and I believe it. I was reliably told that Grenada was not the only country to be visited with that. And I believe all of that.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, my whole concern about granting citizenship under the CBI, I'm not against it, I'm just saying that when you're operating these CBI initiatives, you have to bear in mind you have a responsibility to the people of Grenada to protect the integrity of the passport. Those are some of the concerns I thought I would share with you, Dr. Bob, on your program. I want to thank you again for having me. I especially want to thank Rion Charles. Is he your chief executive officer?
he might as well be. He might as well be, because he really does a lot of the groundwork himself, and Kitaka Mawuto, my two chief executive officers. Yes, I will start calling them CEOs now.
Both last night and this morning, he patiently put me through
Walked
my
you through the
paces.
process.
I
Correct.
was here before the flood in relation to technology.
Yes,
The fact that I'm on the program all shows that he did an excellent work.
he really did. He really
So
did. He's a brilliant young man. Very brilliant.
if you have any questions for me, sure. Otherwise, may I be excused now?
Absolutely, Dr. Alexis. Thank you so much for appearing on the program today. This is such an important discussion. And as a reminder, and Dr. Alexis, you are excused. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Have
you
a
again,
good day.
Dr. Alexis, for appearing on the program.
Enjoy the rest of your program.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Dr. Francis Alexis, former Attorney General under the National Democratic Congress administration of the late Sir Nicholas Brathwaite in 1990, from 1990 to 1995. But what we want to do now is to just go back down memory lane a little bit. And of course, remember back in 2020, there was a similar hue and cry over a previous piece of legislation around sections of the COVID-19 bill that was eventually withdrawn from Parliament because civil society, again, the NDC opposition at the time, as well as other concerned citizens, including the bar, felt that parts of the COVID-19 emergency powers bill was just too overreaching, and it was so broad that it had the possibility of usurping the constitutional rights of the citizen. So this is an exchange I had with the former Attorney General of Grenada, Mr. Darshan Ramdani. I certainly hope I can have the same conversation with the current Attorney General, Ms. Claudette Joseph, who we understand is away on state business. But Madam Attorney General, we would love to hear from you in respect of justifying elements of this bill that will be going before Parliament this week.
Almost all of the provisions of the regulations.
No, Mr. Attorney General, I'm sorry, I don't think that's accurate. Now let's get to some.
Replicates almost all.
Almost all. So let's get to some of the specific measures that it is not replicating, right?
Thank you, Mr.
And let us begin in miscellaneous part 5 in section 24. And I will quote now. It says that it shall be the duty of every police officer to enforce, in parentheses, using reasonable force if necessary, close parentheses, compliance with this act and with any order, instruction, or condition lawfully made, given, or imposed by any officer or other person under the authority of this act, and for such purpose any police officer may enter any premises without a warrant, unquote. Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. I think the permission for a warrant
Hold on, Mr. Bob.
must be granted by a magistrate's court.
Hold on, Mr. Bob.
Yes.
You started this line of conversation, and I'm smiling with you.
Yes.
To say that you were going to read me a provision which was not identical or almost identical to what was in the reg.
Yes.
Then you went on to read it and then said it's unconstitutional. So let me answer both of them,
Sure.
which you raised.
Absolutely.
First of all, if you look at the regulations, Mr. Bob, you will see that those exact words in a section in the regulation. Presently, the regulation which has been governing Grenada, which is presently in force, contains that very same provision. Yes?
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And one would question the soundness of thought and reason and the mind of a minister for education who would so impugn their own college.
And then government put a spin on it and said unions agreed to a salary freeze. We never agreed to a salary freeze. And we expect that for the period 2013, at least 2014, that we should get something.
We deserve better. GRDC, we deserve better. We deserve better. GRDC, we deserve better.
The Grenada Public Workers Union will not negotiate the health of its members. Please take note.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
If our issues are not addressed, you will soon find that the membership will take the matter into their hands, and you will soon find, I'm not bluffing, we are not bluffing, that there will be industrial action around the corner if the issues we speak of today are not addressed.
And that institution of public service that says we must have established officers. And very soon, when many of us leave the public service, the established officers, what we would find is that we have a public service that is made up only of contract workers, and government can do as it wishes.
We are fighting for pension and gratuity. No section on our workers.
We have to unify our members, we have to empower our members, we have to train our members. For the last couple of years, when you talk to members, have they had training in terms of their rights and responsibilities? Have they had engagement in terms of the arms that existed?
And welcome back, viewers and listeners. We want to quickly get to our next segment because we want to respect the time of our guests. We have with us today the incumbent president of the Grenada Public Workers Union. He is Mr. Brian Grimes. And we have Mr. Fimber Thomas. Mr. Fimber Thomas, a fellow St. Davidian. You are from St. David, so I didn't know that until I read your resume today. But again, thank you again for staying with us. And you are also an active member of the Grenada Public Workers Union. You are also contesting in the internal elections of the union that will be held this month. Incidentally, this month is also the anniversary of the founding of your great union. So, gentlemen, thank you for appearing on the program. And I want to begin with you, Mr. Thomas, because we want to respect your time. Mr. Thomas, can you give us a sense of why you've decided to jump in the race for the presidency of the union? Obviously, you served in roles as vice president, second vice president, I believe, and first vice president. You also served in the youth arm. Correct. Why the presidency at this point?
Well, good morning to you, Mr. Bob, Dr. Bob. Good
Yes,
morning
sir.
to your listening viewers. Good morning to Grenada. A blessed morning. Over the years, I've sit, on the union executive for approximately 8 years. I have observed. I've observed. I have went through the trenches. I have marched in the street. So I have a pretty wealth of knowledge when it comes towards the issues that we face, the ills that we face. If you look at the current construct of the union, there's a lack of, participation. If you look at even this election, most of the seats has gone uncontested, and that could tell you that there is no interest in trade unionism. So as a young man, I see it fit to take up the mantle as a young man and push myself forward to bring, inclusiveness and to encourage more young people to get involved in trade unionism. If I may, I may just point out a few things that I see important that the role the union should play in the well-being of its members and certain aspects. I could speak on the psychological needs, most basic of all, and arise from internal, physical imbalances such as health, food, shelter. The need to be satisfied and fairly, frequent intervals, proper negotiations with the employer. Security needs, are the next level and consistent of security, freedom and well-being, fairness, predictability, meaning, we will add additional, for example, an additional hour a week where members, could visit the office after work and share their experiences at the workplace. This will allow, persons to be affiliated with each other. You need to bring back that kind of feeling of belonging. We want, to persons to share each other's experience, give members the opportunity to form meaningful relationships and opportunity to gain support from others and, the needs and expectation of workers. Work is not only, the place where persons can engage in activities and that satisfying needs. And although being an employee, the norma involves exchanging labor rewards. Personally, persons usually have more needs than money. Members come to expect that, at least some of these will, to be satisfying the work situation. So it is useful to have ways, of classifying the various ways in which reward can be obtained through. For example, intrinsic reward, extrinsic rewards, social rewards. The union for the past years, has been focusing on extrinsic rewards, tangible benefits such as salary, pension. What about fringe benefits? What about intrinsic rewards? That comes from psychological rewards, that comes from experience of the work. Example, having the opportunity to use skills and abilities, having a sense of challenge, or achievement, or having one's effort recognized and appreciated. These rewards come from inside the personal and are given by people to themselves, which can only occur in the condition they, experience, allowing them to feel this way. Social rewards, which are obtained by being with other people, often having a sense of common purpose, with them, that, and obtaining, reassurance and confirmation of identity. Example, workout groups. The union could look, as having, members form workout groups and stuff, human, have a very strong will, of social impulse, and the union have to help its members with some sort of satisfaction of needs and expectations. We have to remember that everything achieved in or by an organization depend on human activity. Motivation of members is key. Performance is how well the task is performed. The environment again, is in the context of, equipment, meaning those officers who, like for example, I'll draw an example, like the custom officers, having the necessary tools when they have to perform, their duties. The office spaces conducive for the amount of staff placed in an area. These are some of the pressing, issues that we face, and I've sit over the years and I've observed those things. I may not have been on the media speaking out, but at that time was an opportunity for me to sit, learn, observe, see the ills, so that when I put myself up, I am approaching it with a sense of gathering data, gathering information, and coming with, black and white and real, studied, issues, not just lip service, but things that are actually happening after doing such, research.
Okay. All right. If you can stick a pin, I'll get back to you quickly. But just as a disclaimer before I bring in Mr. Grimes, just so you're aware, viewers and listeners, we did invite the other candidate in this race, Ms. Beryl Clarkson. Ms. Beryl Clarkson declined to appear on the Bub Report today. And that invitation was extended to her a few weeks ago. So for full disclosure, we did invite the other candidate. In all fairness to all of the candidates, we invited everyone, and this is what we do. There was no sinister intent here to exclude anyone from this conversation. Mr. Grimes, you want to return as president of the Public Workers Union. You were here 2 years ago for a similar forum. And again, another full disclosure. This is not the first time the Bub Report has had this. So for those of you who have been saying, what were we trying to do? We have done this before. We have accommodated the Public Workers Union on several occasions. We have accommodated labor issues on several occasions before. There is tape to prove it. Mr. Grimes, why do you want to be the president of the Public Workers Union, or returned in your role as president of the Public Workers Union? You've just heard Mr. Thomas here articulate the case in respect of lack of participation. I remember when you came here and you opposed your sister Rachel Roberts for the presidency. You sounded just like Mr. Thomas. So the question is, have you been able to fulfill the promises that you made to the membership of your organization?
Yes. So, Dr. Bob, good morning to you. Good morning to your listeners. Good morning to all the viewers. Also, good morning to my fellow union member, Mr. Fimba Thomas, Brother Fimba Thomas, my worthy opponent. Yes. So your question is, why do I want to return as president? Well, I just want to start a bit with my history in the Grenada Public Workers Union. As I stated to people before, I didn't choose the union chose me. It is just a natural marriage. I have come to realize that unionism is basically in my DNA. I started in the union, let's say around 2007. I officially became the youth chair in 2009. right? And that's basically a position where you have to be between the age of 18 and 35. And it was a pilot project. And because of that, I got to sit on the national executive under the leadership of Mrs. Madonna Harford, right? I continued to be the youth chair until 2013, and I had to exit based on age requirements. Now, I was wondering what's going to happen here. I am so enjoying sitting amongst these learned minds and being part of a cohesive movement, a movement that affects the nation in a positive way. What should I do? And I was encouraged by one of my fellow executive members to vie for a position of public relations officer, which was then held by well-known journalist and sporting figure, Brother Ray Roberts. And to me, at that time, they were big shoes to fill, but I gave it the old heave-ho. I put my name in a hat, and I was successful. I was the PRO for 3 consecutive terms, all right, in 2019, up to 2019, from 2013 to 2019. In 2019, I challenged for the position of president. I was unsuccessful, but my exploits in the trade union movement didn't stop based on that reality. In fact, it just redoubled my conviction that I have a lot more to contribute to the trade union movement, right? So I challenged again in 2021, and I was successful. And here I am after 2 years being president, where we have had tremendous accomplishments, I would say, within that 2 years. And I believe there is a lot more that can be done. And I'm seeking the opportunity again to continue the work that myself and my able executive have done over the past 2 years.
If you were to give your membership a comprehensive report card, and Mr. Thomas, I'll get back to you because I know that you have to go soon.
Right.
If you were to give your leadership a comprehensive report card of what was accomplished in your tenure as president, what would be a very specific list of deliverables you were able to accomplish? And the second part of that question is, all right, so why were you not able to accomplish what you did not accomplish?
All right, good. So I expect that you will give me some time because it's quite a few accomplishments really. So I'll start off with the accomplishments, right? And so bear with me. The first accomplishment I will speak on is related to pension. This is not a unilateral accomplishment by no stretch of the imagination, but I was part of the baton passing to bring pension to reality in this country for public officers. So when I came in March of 2021, my job as the new and incoming president was to ensure that the matter did not die. So in collaboration with the other major unions, that is the Grenada Union of Teachers and the Technical and Allied Workers Union, we collaborated and brought the matter before the court in July of 2021, right? And then it was submitted and there was a hearing in October, actually in July, and we had an official submission in October with the lawyers, that's Mr. James Bristol, Mr. Cajetan Hood and Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. They sent in the official submissions, but I got to sit and a couple members got to sit virtually and look at the case being presented in July, right? And it bore fruit in March of 2022, where on the blessed day where we had AGM, my first AGM, I was, blessed with the opportunity to actually read out, right? Read out the pension judgment to members. It's one of my proudest moments. It was very emotional, and it was a hearty moment for me. So I was part of a dream team, I would say, all going the way back to Brother Adrian Francis, Sister Madonna Harford, Sister Rachel Roberts, and now myself. And I was blessed to read out that judgment, which said basically that the Pension Disqualification Act was shut down, and that it's unconstitutional. So that meant a lot after nearly 40 years of public officers seeing trouble under that unjust law. So that's one. Now, secondly, I think it's extremely significant, and it's well known, there was a serious battle at the T.A. Marisho Community College. Very, very serious. In fact, it was one of the most, trying industrial actions we have had since I've been a part of the movement. We were out in the battlefield for 4 months, right? 4 long months, right? A lot of things happened during that period. Even the police were called. My name was called on the radio. I was, my name was dragged in the mud based on things that we had to do as a union to defend the rights of the workers at TAMCC, right? A lot of noise was being made, but that's not the pretty part of leadership, but we had to do what we had to do. Anyway, after that long struggle, which we saw to the end, TAMCC workers were given 22% increases after 10 years, of not getting any increases at all. And I ensured, along with the executive, that they also got retroactive payment, and I saw that to the end. And I, as the union president, signed a memorandum of understanding giving timelines as to the payment of that retroactive, which added up to $4 million. As we speak right now, the MOU stated June as the last payment, but hats off to the NDC government. They paid the last tranche at the end of February. So that was a very, very significant achievement, 22% increases and $4 million in retroactive for that statutory body. And the workers, they were pleased with that representation. Now, also, I want to speak on occupational safety and health a little bit. And the government printry, the workers there, they had issues over an extended period of time, decade basically, whereby they were in very, very deplorable conditions, right? The air quality was poor based on the pervasiveness of the chemicals within that area. The roofs were leaky and so forth. And the conditions there were nothing to speak positive about. When people saw the graphics related to the conditions, they were appalled. Over a period of 1 year, ranging from December of 2021 to October of 2022, practically a year, we protested to ensure that the conditions there change. And if you go to the government printry now, it's a drastic difference. In fact, the current government is beautifying the place, but the industrial action went from one administration to the next. There was no bias, and we followed through on that. And the workers at the government printry, I can say, based on my interactions with them, are very, very pleased with the results there, right? We also completed some negotiations that were left hanging over that period of time. And I say we, because I didn't do it alone. My executive, including Sister Daisy Hazard, Sister Paula Phillip, we worked hard to ensure that the GIDC got the increases. We worked hard to ensure that obviously TAMCC got the increases that I just spoke about, and also NAWASA. So there was a heavy focus on statutory bodies and tying up collective bargaining agreements, and that were long outstanding. Now, another accomplishment is the minimum wage review. I, as president, I was very passionate about this based on my interactions with daycare workers. I spoke to a daycare worker that was working 20 years and their salary was $1,000. I was appalled by this, and I used my position as a vehicle, as an instrument, my position as president, to really speak on the minimum wage issue. I spoke about it at the annual May Day rally, and I'm pleased to announce that I am a part of the minimum wage advisory committee based on my peers in the TUC, seeing my passion for it. And we are well on the way to, reviewing the minimum wage. And within I would say within 2 years, there will be a new minimum wage order, which will benefit workers, low-income workers within this country, right? Very important, Dr. Bob, I want to go on. In one calendar year, and that is 2022, we did something that was never done in over 30-something years at the Grenada Public Workers Union. We certified a workplace. In fact, we certified 3. One wasn't done in over 30-something years. And those workplaces are the Grenada Postal Corporation, the National Training Agency and the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Treatment Center. In fact, the Grand Bacolet received increases about 20%, over 20% increases, and also retroactive, similar to what public officers got. And they are elated. They did not see increases for over 7 years, right? So we certified 3 new workplaces, and that is a demonstration that outsiders, workplaces, workers generally are seeing the work of our organization under my leadership, and they are interested in us representing them, meaning the PWU. When we did the polls for trade union recognition, I think basically we got 99.9% of the votes for, in terms of the workers wanting us to represent them. So that bodes well for our public perception and the work that we have been doing for the past couple of years. Just as an aside, from labor issues, there are a couple internal issues that needs to be spoken of. In 2022, we signed an agreement because part of my campaign, I said to workers, we need to understand who our workers are. We need a database. It took a little bit longer than I expected based on some hurdles, but I think we signed on to the proper service provider in Sonova Incorporated, and I know they are a reputable agency in that recently they have done a deal, for lack of a better word, at this point in time with the ECCB, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, for Dcash. ECCB would not go with any fly-by-night organization in terms of partnering to do Dcash. And so Sonova is currently part of the PWU family, and with that, a lot of our services will be digitized. In fact, one thing that can be said currently is that we are having elections on the 16th, and the returning officers will be able to have an app, a link to utilize, to check, apart from the physical list, be able to type it in on their phones to
yes,
see
Mr.
if
Grimes,
one is a member or not.
Mr. Thomas has to go, so I want to give him an opportunity for some closing comments before he does. Mr. Thomas, are you there with us? I think Mr. Oh, there is Mr. Thomas. I know you have to go now, sir. So I want to give you an opportunity for some closing comments. But before I do have a very important question for you in respect of the politicization of the Public Workers Union. Are you concerned that the Public Workers Union, that there is undue political influence in the Public Workers Union? If you were to become president, how do you ensure that the Public Workers Union can serve not as an adjacent to any political party, but that you as president would be able to ensure that your members and the membership of the union can operate within the context of the apolitical spectrum? Because you are attending, of course, I saw on your resume, you are at the Cipriani College of Labor. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, I'm pursuing, yes. I'm pursuing.
Yeah, and which is, I think that is impressive. Yeah. You're following Sister Clara Charles in that respect. Yeah. But so that's the first part of the question. And the second question, sir, has to do with if you were in the position of president of the union and what happened in Carriacou in respect of the dismissal of the temporary workers in Carriacou following a change of administration, what would you have done differently? And then I would give you an opportunity for some closing comments. So,
well, I'll answer the second question first.
Yes.
With the second question, you see, I have a legal background. I understand certain parts, working under the Ministry of Legal Affairs, have a lot of lawyers who are friends. I have a pretty wide legal background. Now, with the issue of Carriacou, it will be irresponsible of me to really speak on the scope of what happened in Carriacou. But if I was to deal with the situation, what I would have done is find out the scope of the situation, what really happened, what were the dynamics, sit down, engage relevant parties to understand what really took place, and then we can follow labor procedures. We must understand there is procedures that must be followed. There is labor procedures that must be followed, and I would have probably engage, find out what was the situation, what was the whole dynamics of what had happened, and then take a different or legal approach. For now, I will be
When you
honest
say
with you,
legal approach, doesn't the union have a responsibility to advocate for its workers?
The union have a responsibility to advocate for our workers, but we must stick within also the parameters of the laws that governs trade unionism and governs labor and labor rights. Now we have an Employment Act, we have a labor code that gives us certain rights and gives us the guide to handling certain situations. So, as I've said, I don't know the scope about Carriacou, and it will be irresponsible of me to speak on the whole matter of Carriacou. But what I will say, how it was handled in the media, to me, was the wrong way. I wouldn't have handled it in the media like that without getting
You
down
mean
to the dynamics.
how the leadership of the union handled it in the media?
How it was handled in the media.
Okay. What was your concern? Should they not have gone to the media?
The thing, what I've said, Mr. Bob, I said if it was me, I cannot speak to the dynamics, but I'm saying if it was me, I would have dealt with the situation differently. I cannot speak to it because it's going to be responsible of me, and I don't want to give information that I do not have.
Okay, that's fair. Fair enough. Fair enough. Because
according to the political alignment, now we must understand that trade unions are to represent its workers to its best of ability. Now, I believe in relationships. I believe in having good relationships, mutual understanding, mutual respect. I don't believe in lying down in bed with any government, but I do believe that in order for your membership to benefit, in order for things to go smoothly, you must have a mutual, respectable relationship with any government that is in power. It's not a matter of you're bowing to them or you're lying in bed with them, but there must be some form of mutual understanding in order for discussions, negotiations to flow smoothly. In the event that we as a union exhaust every single labor-related how we deal with grievances and stuff within the labor unit, then we have an opportunity to do what we have to do as a body. But as it stands with lying in bed with government or bowing to any government or stuff like that, no.
Well, not even government. We're talking here political influence.
Well, political
I remember
influence, government,
with Chester Humphrey,
influence.
When Chester Humphrey was aligned to publicly declared his support for the new National Party, shall we say. The entire trade union community in Grenada branded him a sellout. They call him guns in grease chests. He's a lapdog of the NNP, and so that was the context of the question.
We all have, based on our constitution, we all have a constitutional right to freedom of association. We have that right to whoever we want to associate with. But what I'm saying, when it comes to fighting for the cause of the workers, then I am not in that, where if it's wrong, I still side with it. Because you my government or you my political influence, no.
Or because you'd have a bias, okay, very well.
No. I'm an independent thinker, but I believe in good relationship. I believe in diplomacy. I believe in being diplomatic, and I believe in following the different labor relations when it comes towards grievances and handling issues within the labor movement. So I am not my intentions is not to, get political. My concern is that the union needs a revitalization. Over the years, there is not participation. And you can see it if you look at the current, elections. There's no participation. No, the people is not interested. And I want to bring back that revitalization. I want to bring back that inclusiveness, and it takes a collective effort from everyone within the membership. And I believe incentives must be given, proper training must be given. People must know, workers must know their rights in terms of labor. And I believe that we are long to bring back that togetherness and the true meaning of what union means. The office of the president is an office, and we must remember that. It's an office, and it's a continuum. If I become president, And whatever my achievements or collective achievement with all the members and the executive, it's a continuum. It goes on. When I leave office, the other president comes and takes over and continue. So my thing is, and I'll close with that, my thing is I am not ready to, as I've said, I sit there for the past 8 years and it's basically talk. I've heard the current president speak about achievements, but some of the achievements that has been.
But Mr. Thomas, you were also on the executive. So if you're going to be chiding the current president, you served in leadership as well. So you have given an indictment of the last 8 years. You were part of the executive as well. So don't you have to take some responsibility for that as well?
This is the reason why I'm putting myself up, because there is no inclusion. There's no inclusion. So this is the reason why I'm putting myself up to bring back a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion, a sense of objectivity with respect, So, I'll close on this. And,
objectivity is one of my favorite words, by the way. But if you are elected as president of the union, sir, the Bub Report has always been available to the unions. I'm still a union man. I'm part of the union at my institution at work. I'm a shop steward there. So I do understand the importance of trade unionism, and all the best to you in the elections.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for having me. And Mr. Charles is his name.
Rion Charles, yes.
Yeah, he's very precise. I thank you for having me. And just one more thing before I leave.
Yes, sir.
I'm not just bringing, as I've said, lip service. I'm a family man. I am committed to my family. I have kids. I understand what it is to struggle. I understand what it is to go out and get. And this is the kind of mentality that I'm bringing. One of a family man, a father who knows how to go get for the people that he serves. So I just want to leave this, and thank you for having me, Dr. Bob. And I look forward to.
I know that you have to run, so I know that you have to run. So thank you again for appearing on the program, sir. That was Mr. Fimber Thomas. Unfortunately, Mr. Thomas has to leave, but thank you, sir. But Mr. Grimes, back to you. And again, the same question I'm going to ask to you in respect of political influence in the union. And now in the last election, the Trade Union Council openly endorsed at least one union leader, of the president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. I can't speak for you. I think you came very close to endorsing, but not as close to endorsing the current government in office. I pay attention to those things, Mr. Grimes. But in respect of openly endorsing political parties as trade unions, do you feel as if openly aligning oneself to a particular political organization can compromise your efforts as a union to be independent, can open the floodgates to political influence in the trade union movement and in your union as well, Mr. Grimes?
Right.
And finally, why were you so open about, supporting, shall we say, the transformational agenda of the NDC? But go ahead.
Yes. Well, my personal philosophy as far as trade unionism and politics, as current president of the union, I believe when it's time to go in the voting booth, you take that personal decision. But once you exit that booth, you have to get back to business as usual. I don't see it helpful, even though, like you said, and I'm not going to deny it, I was flirting with openly supporting the National Democratic Congress prior to June 23rd. I just didn't come out and do it because I didn't think it would be entirely responsible for me to do that. And I'll tell you why. At the end of the day, no government is perfect. The trade union is set up as an institution to create balance in society, just as the fourth estate of which you are part. Now, if I wholesale endorse an administration, a party, a government, I think that will sort of handcuff my efforts to represent workers. So I was guarded with that. I'm not going to lie. The NNP, we had tremendous battles with the new national party, and pension was at the top of it. And you had here the National Democratic Congress openly promising, listen, we're going to pay it, which they did, and congratulations for that. And also the issue of regularization, which this union is heavily focused on. The new National Party, surrogates, and high-ranking members stated on platform that regularization is actually a threat to the national interest. Now, I, as a trade union leader, seeing this and hearing this and looking after my membership, I would not dovetail with that particular philosophy. So if you interpret that, in terms of me endorsing Congress at that time, I would not fault you for that. But going past
it is your right to support any party you want to. That's your constitutional right. But again, openly supporting as a public servant, and many public servants, by the way, openly supported the National Democratic Congress in the last election.
Well, if I did, it would be my constitutional right, but I preferred not to, because this is how I operate. As I sit here as Brian Grimes, if you go into different quarters, ask different people, some would say, well, he's a old NDC, I just using colloquial terms.
Yeah.
Or he, and then P by he off. So nobody knows in terms of who or what I purport. In fact, I don't subscribe to any political party. I subscribe to my personal principles, and I take the job as trade union president very, very seriously. So those constituents within our bargaining unit, whether they are NNP or NDC or GULP or any other political organization they support, they must know that Brian Grimes will support their interests irrespective of their political backings.
So the question is, how then do we ensure, you just mentioned guardrails and separation of powers, how do you maintain those guardrails as obviously separating what you do outside of the union from coming into the union politically?
Yeah, well, this is not a complex process for me at all, and it seems as though I'm probably a unique individual in this country. I don't let any sort of political biasness influence my leadership style. I just stick with the issues, very simplistic. The workers who elected me, if they have an issue and they have a grievance and their rights are being abrogated by whichever administration, I look at the employment law, I look at labor laws and so forth, and I address it irrespective of which administration is in power. Listen, I was sort of chastised, I would use that word, shortly after June 23rd, being out. I spoke about the TAMCC struggle. After June 23rd, I was on the roundabout about 3 days after, protesting with the workers to ensure that the ball was not dropped and that the rights of the workers and the issue would be addressed as speedily as possible. And it did not matter to me which administration won or lost, but the issue must be addressed, the issue must be pushed, and the workers must be represented to the highest level. And that is my personal philosophy, and as long as I'm part of the union, it will continue to be.
Okay. Let us talk about some pressing issues in respect of what's happening in the public sector now. Some very hard, cold realities, stone cold realities that you have to confront. One has to do with pension reform. The National Democratic Congress in opposition said that, had one position on pension, but then when they got into office, their position was not dissimilar to the position of the previous administration. So pension reform is an issue that they're talking about putting the pension reform committee in place. What is your position, or what would be your position for pension reform? Do you believe that the current scheme that exists needs to be reformed? And would the union be on board when the government comes to you and says, this is what the reality is that we are confronted with? Would you support the proposals that the government would put forward in respect to pension reform?
Well, let me just say this. In this new dispensation, I have as part of my plan to work with government to ensure that pension reform is favorable, remains favorable to the members that we represent. So to cut to the chase and to answer your question directly, I want to just put it on the table here to say pension reform is a necessity. it is a necessity. The fact is, most pension schemes work better when it is contributory. One thing that this administration have stated openly in Parliament is that the contributory aspect of it will be for new entrants. So people such as myself and others who are existing within the public service, they would not have to go to that contributory measure. But sometimes you have not just to look at the letter of the law, sometimes you have to look at the fiscal realities which we exist in. And if government, and I'm saying this, it may be controversial, but if government has to continue to give us increases that are necessary for us to stay above the inflation level and for us, our standard of living to be maintained or to, to be upheld and go higher, as well as to service the pension obligation, something must be done. So I have no qualms whatsoever with pension reform. I just want to make sure, along with my executive and all those who are participating within the trade union movement, that it is not unfavorable at the end of the day for our members. But one must consider the national interest as a union leader when doing whatever job, role he or she has to do. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, Section 92 of the Constitution says, well, our pension is a must. Yes, it's a must, and it's recognized, and I fought hard for that, along with other union leaders. But the national interest must be put into play, and we must come with something that is fiscally pragmatic and sustainable for our country. And I think at the end of the day, our members will benefit because the government would not go belly up, and the government will benefit, and the nation on a whole will benefit with that collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm. And we're quickly running out of time, Mr. Grimes, but we also wanted to talk about the temporary workers, which we have been advocating for in Carriacou, especially Carriacou, after the last election. Now, the Prime Minister, the current incumbent Prime Minister of Grenada, Mr. Deacon Mitchell, said during the campaign that there ought not to be two public services, that everyone who is temporary should be made permanent. And what did we see? We saw a shifting of the goalpost in respect of the dismissal of a lot of the temporary workers. The allegations were made that a lot of them were dismissed because of their politics, their political affiliation, except there was lots of political affiliation in this election. I saw teachers openly campaigning for the incumbent party, but that's their right to do. But the point about it is, you also advocated for the regularization of temporary workers under the previous administration, but that did not happen under your tenure. Why is that? Why did you fail to ensure and advocate for the regularization of a lot of these workers who are now on the breadline?
Yeah. Yes. The video just got stuck for a moment. Yes. I would not use the word failure. This is a continuum. So we had 2 years. I was speaking to some of my accomplishments, and because it was so lengthy, we had to stop. But the regularization in the new term, 2023 to 2025, we as an executive and as a union will have laser focus. So, Dr. Bob, you have to understand, and everyone has to understand, sometimes things are promised, but then the economic realities or just the realities might be different. We know that the government is certainly capable of regularization. They have a lot on their plate right now, and we will work with them collaboratively to ensure it happens. But political reality, it's easy to say a lot in opposition, but when you get in there, it's different. And that's just the hard reality of it. So I assume, and I would want to give this new administration the benefit of the doubt. They have not made a year as yet. They have paid pension, and they are trying to get their feet wet to align themselves to ensure that regularization becomes a reality. So at this point, I would not say it's a failure. I think it's a work in progress. We have set up our database, so we'll work with the Department of Public Administration to do things in segments. So for example, with regularization, we'll say the first set that should be regularized are those public officers who are permanent and acting in positions for a lengthy period of time. So then you absorb them, and that is one section. Then we go to the PSC workers, right, who are on contract and so forth. We regularize them. So it should be done in phases. And once you start to do things, there will be a compound effect. And eventually, the public service will be regularized, and hopefully we can realize that dream of Deacon Mitchell, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, and have one public service. The union certainly will assist him in making that dream a reality.
And I just want to pick up something you said on regularization there, but something that your colleague, Mr. Thomas, said. He said that essentially what he said was that your leadership did no research in respect of the firing of the workers in Carriacou, that you essentially went to the media without having all the facts with respect to the dismissal of the workers in Carriacou. Mr. Grimes, I want to give you an opportunity. Why, according to Mr. Thomas, then, if going by Mr. Thomas's explanation, was your approach then the wrong one by advocating for these temporary workers before getting all the facts?
No, I stand by my decision as current president of the union, and let me explain why. What you saw on the 18th of August 2022 was not just a jump to it situation. Prior to that, there was a lot going on in the background. At that time, we had with us Mr. Willan Thompson, a trained lawyer, as our executive secretary, and he had a relationship. He knew some of the players in Carriacou well, including the PS. I sort of have a mutual friendship with the minister. So there was a lot of reaching out in the background, right? One has to understand, Dr. Bob, that the workers, we didn't seek out this fight or this battle. The workers reached out to us. They are union due paying members. They are in the low income bracket. They are all women, vulnerable women. They are not even necessarily public service commission workers. So they don't have the luxury now of pension and so forth. They have a low salary, and they reached out to us. So the legal and the moral thing to do was to have spoken on the issue. So our efforts in terms of speaking on it, it did not lead to anywhere that seemed as though we will come to mutually beneficial grounds. So we had to act. At the end of July, all into August, basically every week, we were hearing of a new termination with some of our members. Under my leadership, I could not have allowed that to continue. So we brought it to the fore for distillation and for ventilation. Mind you, the matter is before the Ministry of Labor as we speak. And up to this day, we are in 2023. The players involved on the government end have not come in a meaningful way to address this matter at the Ministry of Labor, at the level of conciliation, at the level of the Labor Commissioner, right? We have
the Labor Commissioner was just fired, so maybe that could account for the delay as well. I said that in jest. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, but we had commissioners before. And we have workers, Dr. Bob, that they were terminated in the presence of others. The dignity was stripped, and they were not even given basic benefits like you terminate somebody, they have 30 days holidays inside, you pay them for it. They were just dismissed today for tomorrow. In fact, out of the 5, one of the workers, I think that one is the aunt of the Honorable Minister in Carriacou. They were not terminated. They were, we would say, constructively dismissed because they went from being a caregiver, a geriatric caregiver, to taking care of animals. You know, the skill set is totally different. And while we did not get a proper hearing for that, because again, the representatives of government did not turn up, in the midst of it, when we had a meeting, I believe on the 12th, before the Labor Commissioner, the representative did not turn up. On the 18th, that one worker was just arbitrarily terminated. So you're not going through the process, the dispute resolution process, but you continue to exact very damning discipline on the said workers. So there's a total disrespect there for the dispute resolution process. And in hindsight being 2020, I think if we did not have that press conference, things would be even worse for some of our members on the sister island.
Well, we will be watching the space to see how that unfolds. Of course, unfortunately, the workers have been dismissed. But, as a union, as you said, you do have a right to represent your workers. Now, we have a question from your predecessor, my very good friend, Sister Madonna Hafford. And she's saying, can Brand state his plans for the upcoming term if re-elected as president in respect of the development of the union and its membership? That is an issue that Mr. Thomas also raised as well.
Yes. That's a key issue. And hats off to Sister Madonna Hafford, because she basically grew me up. She groomed me. Like I said, I went through stages, and she was the one that nurtured me, even when I did not even believe in myself. So hats off to her. And one of the things that she did, and I have not seen it since after her tenure, to be very frank, is having a lot of workshops, developmental workshops. Ms. Hafford used to do a lot of that, and this is where I found myself falling in love with the union. So we'll have to do a lot more of that, because 2 years, it's a very, very tight space to do some of these things. But we have to develop the human resource, do a lot of training. We also have to ensure that we have a greater and more highly trained cadre of shop stewards going forward. I see that as a shortcoming from my period of 2021 to 23, which I will quickly correct once I get back in there. So everything cannot happen within 2 years, as one can appreciate. The problems inherited when I came in, they are mountainous. But as I said, I'm going to chop them down one by one, and I think we have done tremendous work in the last couple of years, and we'll have heavy focus on human resource development. In fact, one thing I would want to enact, I'd want to collaborate with the Department of Public Administration and create a program with the DPA to award and recognize the most productive workers in the various ministries every end of year. And some people, they say, well, productivity is an issue. I say there's always room for improvement with everything. But we will look to collaborate with DPA and award and, emulate people who have done well over the past year, whether it's a plaque, monetary award, so that people have something to strive towards. People are incentivized to work, and people are recognized for standing out and being outstanding in the public service. So those are just some of the things we plan to do.
All right, Mr. Grimes, I'll take a quick break. We'll come up for air, and then we'll come back for some closing comments today. From you, yes, stand by. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bud Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG-10 throughout the Caribbean.
Very proud of what you're doing, and I think it's much needed. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you again for watching the Bub Report. Viewers and listeners, we want to thank you sincerely. Ashley, thank you so very much. Senator Chester Humphrey, welcome to the Bub Report. Mr. Mitchell, welcome to the program. The Honorable Jumani Williams, we call him Jumani, who is the public advocate for the city of New York. The Honorable Basdio Pandey, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Pandey, welcome to the Bub Report of Grenada. The Honorable Tobias Clement. Mr. Clement, welcome to the Bub Report. Is it Nicolai or Nikolai? I hope I pronounced it.
Nikolai.
It's Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to the program, Her Excellency Ambassador Luan Gilchrist. Mr. Randall Robinson, you are here in your private capacity and in your personal capacity. Yesterday, we learned that you were detained by law enforcement in Grenada. So you come from a family of public servants.
Yes, we are a family of public servants.
So you're saying that you have to do more, but my question is, what have you done as president of the union to ensure that that happens?
To the cards that I have drawn, that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the public...
But you're also a servant of the people. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are? Welcome back, viewers and listeners. And at this time, we are going to conclude our conversation with the president of the Grenada Public Workers Union. Mr. Grimes, what date is the election again? Just give us a quick reminder.
March. That's Thursday.
That's Thursday of this week. Okay. It's interesting that the union was formed in March. Tomorrow we're celebrating March 13th, a month of revolution indeed. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Grimes, I want to give you an opportunity for some closing comments in advance of the internal vote on Thursday. Over to you.
Yes. Well, again, I want to thank you for the platform. It's always amazing being on your program because I always look at the program. It's informative. I hope I would have conveyed something that could edify the listenership and the viewership here today. And this platform has allowed people to, probably learn a little bit more about the affairs of the Grenada Public Workers Union. So I'm extremely thankful for it. I just want to encourage members to exercise their franchise on Thursday. Go out there and vote. Go out there and vote, right? I want you to go out there and vote. Irrespective, I would like you to vote for me, obviously, but just vote if you have to make the democracy within the union very alive and active. Our intention, and I say our because I'm working with others, Sister Daisy Hazard, Sister Paula Phillip. Please vote for Sister Paula Phillip. If anything, she has been a tremendous help to me as president in the last couple of years and would have made some meaningful contribution. She's up for treasurer, so go there and support her. We have a lot to do in the next 2 years, including infrastructural changes at the PWU building. I want to make this building a hub of activity. Our forefathers did a lot in terms of constructing it. In fact, some of the union leaders took personal mortgage to make sure things are well and that the building was constructed. So now we, as the second generation, we must ensure that the building is kept up to mark in the next 2 years once I'm re-elected here, and you will see a hub of activity within the Grenada Public Workers Union. Workers can also look forward, because this is what I have heard when I'm on the ground right now speaking to workers. They want to see a little bit more of the executive members. They want to see a little bit more of the president. Even if I am convinced in my heart that we have been probably the most active executive and union in this country on mass media and even social media regarding some of the issues that we face. The workers really desire that personal touch. So going forward, I've already spoken to members of my team. They will see more of us in the next 2 years as we strive to create that bond and create that interest within the Grenada Public Workers Union. So thanks again. I had a wonderful time on the program, and I want to wish the viewers and the listeners have a happy Sunday. Enjoy your lunch, and members, remember March 16. Come out and give your support.
Mr. Brian Grimes, thank you. I hope I didn't take you away from your Sunday obligations, but you are a public servant, so I consider this public service.
I'm accustomed making sacrifices. That's not new.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, thank you. Viewers and listeners, Mr. Brian Grimes, the incumbent president of the Grenada Public Workers Union, who is attempting to get re-elected in that role. There are lots of challenges facing the union, irrespective of who will be the president of the trade union organization, that particular trade union organization. We have issues of pension reform. We have issues of the regularization of temporary workers. There are issues in respect of public sector reform as well. There are issues in respect of the dwindling participation and interest of public workers in trade unionism in Grenada. At least when I served in the trade union movement in Grenada, that was not to be. That was not a thing, so I guess this is new. But certainly I want to thank all of you viewers and listeners for staying with us. We do apologize for the late start today. We were tripped over by the return of daylight savings time, but as a reminder for those who are in North America, the Bub Report will be aired at the same time that it is aired in Grenada, which is at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. On behalf of the hardworking producers, including Rion Charles, who worked extremely hard this week, I want to thank him again for really assisting me, because this was an extremely busy week for me. But again, we try to bring you a quality program every week. So I thank him and thank everyone for their contributions to the Bub Report. Until next week, have a wonderful week. Take care now. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.